I have been thinking a little more about the multimeter that I might buy for if I were starting out as a new Frugal repairman. In some earlier videos, we've been using this Velman, and the main reason I've been using it is it's very inexpensive. It's like $7. Now, some people have pointed out that sometimes Harbor Freight gives away meters for free. Well, they sort of expect you to come into the store, so it's kind of a promotional. They're sort of you pay for the gas, and they give you the meter kind of thing. But the main reason that I'm going to move away from this Velman is it's not an auto-ranging meter. So I'll move that aside for a second. This meter is auto-ranging, but it does not measure capacitance. In other words, it won't measure a capacitor in any way except just on the resistance scale, which can be useful a little bit when measuring electrolytics, but basically it doesn't do capacitance. And that left me with this Etekcity, which does do all of those things, and some more. But the problem is that this sells right now for just a little under $50, at least on Amazon. I think it was $45 something plus tax. So let's say $50. So I was trying to find a meter, hopefully one in the range of this Tenma, which cost me about just under $20, but that had the features of this Etekcity. Well, one of the first things I did is I went online and I looked and I checked YouTube and so on, and I discovered a few things. For example, the multimeter reviews online. I don't know how many of them are just, well, let's just say not very frugal, or whether they are actually paid promotions that they don't say that or whatever. But, for example, most of the ones that say best 10 multimeters, the multimeter they're recommending costs $150. And generally it's a fluke. I don't mean that to be a pun. Even where they have ratings, for example, one best 10 multimeters of 2019 or something like that, and they had a category for best multimeter under $50. Only trouble is the multimeter they recommend costs $75. Now, where they may have gotten it for $50 if they bought it from China and waited for 6 weeks, but nonetheless, I'm looking for something you can get in a day or two, and it preferably costs under $20. So I found two meters eventually that looked about right for me, and so what I would like to do is spend the rest of this video going over those meters. I won't call it a review because I'm not pretending to be doing everything. This is more if I were buying a multimeter, knowing what I know today, but as my very first multimeter to work on radios at the lowest possible price, but one that I didn't have to keep saying, oh, I wish I'd have bought that one with that more feature. So let me show you the two meters that I bought, and then we'll go through them and see what they do. Well, here are the two meters that I chose. The one on the right is a BT meter. I think it's called a 39C. I'll verify that in a second. And I haven't opened these yet. This also, the package came with these leads packaged in this bag, so that goes with that one. And then an Etekcity. Now, I paid $14 for this meter. I bought it on Amazon. Now, I am a Prime member, so I get free shipping. But so I paid $14. The Etekcity cost $16. And the reason that I chose these two is both of them purport to measure resistance as well as capacitance. They both purport to be auto-ranging. They measure AC and DC current, and they have a number of other features. So what I'm most interested in is a meter that does kind of what that Velman does, but has the auto-ranging, and then, as I pointed out, also will allow me to test the value of capacitors. So let's open these things up and see what they do. So the first meter is this BT39C, which is this middle column here. Let me zoom in a little bit and you can see some of the specs. I'm not going to read them to you. You can go online and find the meter and do a lot better job that way than me trying to read them to you here. But notice over here it does measure DC and AC voltage. It does measure DC and AC current. It does resistance as well as capacitance. Notice right here. It does not measure inductance, but it does measure temperature, so I'm assuming there's a thermocouple in the box. It also measures frequency, which could be useful, especially since it measures up to 10 megahertz. And it measures duty cycle. It also has, I guess, what it calls express function, but according to this, the display is 6,000 counts, and the range select is automatic, and then there's a few other things like diode test, continuity buzzer, and data hold, as well as, let's see what else we got down here. Auto backlight, auto power off, degrees in C and in F, non-contact voltage, true RMS. That could be useful. We may talk about that at some point. Now, if you're measuring sine waves, you don't need a true RMS meter. But if you're measuring something that's not a sine wave and you want to know the RMS value, it's a good thing to have a true RMS meter. It has a relative value that can be useful. And then it has a battery test function for 1.5 volt and 9 volt batteries. By the way, on some of the websites that sell this meter, it claims that it uses 2 AA batteries, but my understanding is it actually uses a 9 volt battery. That's of some interest to people who want to use this to test LEDs, because the diode test voltage, as I understand it, on this meter is about 4 volts. And the nice thing about that is it'll light almost every kind of LED that I'm aware of. Now, we're not interested in LEDs here because in general we don't use them in vintage radios. But if you want something that will also test LEDs, particularly the higher voltage, those that are above 2 or 2.5 volts to turn them on, you don't want to be using 2 AA batteries, because while 3 volts might seem like it'll work, by the time you account for the losses in the meter and the fact that the battery isn't going to be at 1.5 volts for most of its life, you're going to find that it's going to say some diodes, LEDs, are not good when in fact they are. Well, anyway, enough of that. Let's now look at what comes in the box. Okay, here's what it came with: the meter, a set of clip leads with banana plugs, a set of test leads with banana plugs, and also the protective covers to protect you from voltage. These don't have the protective covers, so you do need to be careful if you're measuring high voltage that you don't accidentally contact those tips. A thermocouple. It is a 9 volt battery, so I was right there. A little manual, a magnet that goes on the back, and that can be useful for some people like who want to attach this to their toolbox or something. A wrist strap, and I guess, if you want to be the big nerd on campus and wear it on your wrist, that might be of some use. a little thank you card. So let's get into the details of this meter. Okay, now let's take a look at this meter. Let me zoom in on the model number there, if it'll do that. It's an MSR-A600 made by Etekcity. So let's open it up and see what's inside. Oh, let me take a look at the back. It says on the back, auto ranging, APO for auto power off, LCD with backlight, overload display, maximum voltage 600, maximum display 1999, and battery type it says it uses AAA batteries. So let's open it up and see what else it says. Okay, it comes with the meter, one set of test leads, a small manual, and a little thank you for choosing Etekcity brochure. And by the way, I haven't checked, but because it came with the batteries already installed, but I'm assuming that it's correct that it uses 2 AAA cells. So unlike the 39C, this one I did not have to install the batteries; they came already installed. Okay, well now what I'm going to be doing is taking a look. Oh yeah, let's take a look at what the features of this are. It should be in the manual somewhere. Well, I don't see a nice summary. Let me pause the camera for a second. Okay, yeah, it does DC voltage, AC voltage, resistance, continuity and diode test. And by the way, let's see what it says. Open circuit voltage is 2 volts. And I think that's the same for the buzzer. With the 39C, the first meter I looked at, the voltage output for the diode test is 4.1 volts, but for the buzzer it's only 2.1 volts. Okay, then capacitance, DC current, AC current, and by the way, the reason that I would like to AC current is so that you can properly size a fuse in these older radios. The best way to do that is just to put the meter in place of the fuse and see what the radio, how much current the radio takes, and that's with a signal and the volume turned up a little bit. And then I may show you that when we get to that part with the radio that we're working on for the Frugal repairman. But at any rate, looks like another nice meter. And once again, like I say, this one cost me $16. Now, I'm going to now familiarize myself with the 2 meters and set up a few tests and so on, and then come back and give you my results. But I do want to say, when it comes to price is kind of all over the place. For example, that 39C meter from BT Meter, I paid $14 for it. I think it was $13.95. I logged in while it was en route on another computer, and Amazon was asking $18.95 for the same meter, so they'd raised the price $5. Then, shortly after I got it, I went back to Amazon and checked, and it was now $14.95, so they'd raised the price $1. So that's just Amazon. I'm sure you can find these meters lots of other places, and mainly I'm not trying to tout a particular meter, and I should point out that I don't have any connection with any companies, certainly none of these companies. I have had connection with some of the large electronics companies in the past. I have managed, done engineering and so on for several large companies, but no longer have any financial connection to any electronics company or for that matter, to anything. This is just my view of these meters, and I'm not being paid, or I don't get the meters for free. I buy them. The manufacturer doesn't even know I'm doing this video. So I hope it'll be as objective as possible. But like I said, I'm not going to try to do a complete review. There are some good reviews on these two meters on YouTube and on the internet that are far more comprehensive than I'm going to do. I'm mainly focused on, if I were recommending to a young person or even a not so young person starting out doing radio repair a good Frugal multimeter, what would I recommend? And I'm hoping one of these two, or maybe both, will fulfill that need. So let me get on with familiarizing myself with the meters and then come back and give you some results. Okay, I've completed a number of tests between these two meters, and I have been using as my reference the Keithley 2015 THD, which was last calibrated about a year ago, actually about 13 months ago, and it's very accurate. I've also used a couple of other for example, I used a couple of LCR meters when checking the capacitance, including the Sencor LC102 over there for measuring capacitance, and an Atlas, a Peak Atlas, and some other stuff. I also used this capacitance decade box and this resistance decade box to do some, to check out the resistance readings. Now, I haven't done some things like diode checks and so on. I refer you to, there's a couple of good reviews on YouTube of these meters. One in particular that reviews this 39C in considerable depth, and I would refer you to those. So what did I find out about these meters? Well, fundamentally, both of them work great. Either one would be acceptable. So, to a frugal repairman. So let's look at the actual data that I got. Let me move these out of the way. There we are. Okay. Now, the first thing I did was, and this column is the 39C, the BT39C, and this column is the MSR A600. So the first thing I did is I compared AC voltage resolution, and I found that the A600 will read to AC volts to 100 microvolts, whereas the 39C will only read to a millivolt. Now that may or may not be of interest. On the other hand, the 39C, at least the spec, shows that it goes to 2 kilohertz, whereas the A600, 400 hertz. Now, I was able to get almost 500 hertz within 3 dB using a function generator. And I was able to get almost 3 kilohertz out of the 39C, but these are the specs. So since units will vary, you probably should depend more on the manufacturer's spec there. If you need the slightly higher frequency for reading AC voltage, then I'd go with the 39C. If you need the better resolution, I'd go with the A600. With regards to capacitance, and here is where the two meters differ a significant amount. While the specs are the same at the bottom end, they are not the same at the top end. The 39C specs out to 10,000 microfarads, I didn't have a 10,000 microfarad capacitor. The biggest one I had that I knew the capacity of was approximately 6,800 microfarads. And the 39C read that correctly. The A600 would not read the 6,800, nor would it read anything down to about 2,000. Now that's its spec, but it would not read a capacitor bigger than 2,000 microfarads. So if you need the bigger capacity, I'd go with the 39C. But at the bottom end, I was measuring some very small microcapacitors, and the 39C would not accurately work below 22 picofarads. The A600 worked down to 3 picofarads. And by the way, these were done in both the native as well as the relative mode in both cases. Now with regard to DC voltage, I just took a couple of readings here because I just wanted to generally know where the calibration is. I applied 1.994. Now this is as read on the Keithley. Also, by the way, I used a power supply for this that would only go to 64 volts. So, but I applied 1.994. Basically, what the supply read was 2 volts, but it actually, the Keithley showed it to be 1.994. The 39C read 1.997, and the A600 read exactly 2 volts, 2.00 or 000. At 64 volts, the Keithley showed that the figure was about 3 millivolts higher than 64 volts. The 39C read exactly 64.0, and the A600 64.2. Certainly close enough for the frugal repairman. With regard to AC, I just measured my AC line, and the Keithley shows it to be 123.7, and I did these simultaneously. In other words, I plugged all 3 of these into the same AC line. This one and this one agreed. The A600 read 200 millivolts high, 123.9. Now that's high relative to the other two. With regard to megohm measurements, I measured 11 meg, which is as big as this box will go, and the Keithley measured 11,205, 39C, as you see, the A600 measured a little high, and the 39C a little low. Then I put 2 20 meg resistors in series, that is, one in series with each of the 2 leads, to boost the total to 53. I mainly just wanted to see that these would read in the 50 meg range, and they did, and close enough for me. Then I went down to a meg and did the same thing, and as you see, the A600 just a little low, and the 39C a little low, but not as much, not as low as the A600. Then I went into the K range, and I did 100K, 10K, 1K, 100 ohms, and 10 ohms. And these are the figures I got. Basically, as you see, the A600 on 100K and less tended to read a little low until you got down to 10 ohms, where 10.295 read 10.3 on both meters. So, what I would say is either of these meters, the BT meter, BT39C, or the Etekcity MSR A600 would be adequate for a frugal repairman. And at $14 and $16, although now I think this one is $15. So basically call them both $15 meters. This one was actually $16 and this one was $14, but the prices move around a little bit, and you can probably find them a little cheaper somewhere. But in my opinion, both are very adequate, and the only differences would be if I were measuring fairly large capacitors, that is anything over 2,000 microfarads, I'd go with the 39C. If I were measuring small AC voltages, I would go with the A600. Now, one thing that is different too is the A600 only measures up to 400 hertz, but for simple stuff like 60 hertz, that would be fine. But if you want to measure a kilohertz audio in a radio, for example, which is a standard frequency, then I go with the 39C because it measures accurately to and above 2 kilohertz. So anyway, I hope this has been helpful. I think I have found 2 meters that will work. I probably am going to continue the Frugal Repairman series, and I'll be using the 39C just because, I don't know, I kind of like the orange color. Maybe that's because that was my alma mater's color. But I also like the Etekcity. In fact, I would say that in terms of me using one or the other, I think they're interchangeable. Hope you enjoyed this. Look forward to some more. I will be getting back to Frugal Repairman, though with a new radio. And in the meantime, have a nice day.